calling the meeting, a special meeting of the Wakefield Conservation Commission of the 23rd, 2025. First order of business is to do a roll call. Jennifer.
Present.
Eleanor.
Present.
Present. Commission is all present. See that Ethan's here for our staff, and we have a fair number of folks in attendance as well. Okay, the agenda for tonight is fairly straightforward. We're having a public forum first to do a presentation on the wetlands bylaw proposal and a discussion to solicit public input, and then a bylaw discussion to deal with public feedback and discuss next steps. Jennifer, did you want to make the presentation?
Yes. If I can share the screen.
Go right ahead. I believe everybody's able to do that. Great.
Are you ready for me to start, Paul?
Sorry?
You ready for me to start?
Go right ahead. Yep.
Okay. Welcome to the first public information session on the Conservation Commission's draft wetlands bylaw. I'm Jennifer Fanning, a member of the commission. I'll present an overview of the goals of the bylaw, information on the key aspects of the bylaw, and reasons why the commission wants to adopt a wetlands bylaw in Wakefield. A copy of the draft bylaw is available on the commission's webpage on the town website. We're interested in hearing feedback from the public, questions, comments after tonight's presentation. Tonight we'll have a public comment period after the presentation. Any further questions and feedback that you have after tonight's feedback session, please email to us at the commission email address. Okay, the first question, why does Wakefield need a wetlands bylaw? The wetlands are a key feature of Wakefield's natural landscape. Approximately 20% of Wakefield's land area, so to speak, is wetland. And in fact, Wakefield's most iconic feature, Lake Fauna Palette, is a wetland. Wetlands, both individually and as a system, provide a variety of services to the community, including protecting property by mitigating flooding, filtering pollutants from groundwater and drinking water, and providing necessary wildlife habitat. And wetlands provide all of these services to the community completely free. This bylaw proposal is to increase protections for wetland resources that are currently not well protected under the state's Wetlands Protection Act, specifically in the following areas. We want to increase protections for isolated wetlands, for vernal pools, and for land immediately adjacent to the area called the buffer zone. For those who are not familiar with the term vernal pools are temporary seasonal wetlands that provide unique and important environmental functions, which I'll describe in more detail shortly. Increasing our protections of these resources will increase protection of property in Wakefield against flooding, improve Wakefield's climate resilience, better protect groundwater from pollution, and protect natural wildlife habitat in Wakefield. Okay, what would a proposed wetland bylaw do? The bylaw proposal as written extends protections to new wetland resource areas, namely to isolated wetlands and vernal pools. The Wetlands Protection Act provides very limited protections to these resources. Under the Wetlands Protection Act, vernal pools are only protected when they're certified and when they're within the jurisdictional area of another wetland, which excludes many vernal pools from protection under the Wetlands Protection Act. We also aim to codify a 25-foot no disturb zone, which would limit work that occurs within 25 feet of a protected wetland. This would include wetlands that are currently jurisdictional to the Wetlands Protection Act, as well as to certain isolated wetlands and vernal pools. Lastly, in addition to the interests identified in the Wetlands Protection Act, the proposed bylaw identifies additional public interests in regulating wetlands, including protecting water quality, recreation, sedimentation and erosion control, and protecting rare species habitat in Wakefield. This diagram depicts different types of wetlands that are regulated and not regulated under the Wetlands Protection Act. Currently protected resource areas include wetlands that border on other wetlands, an area called bordering vegetated wetlands, the land under wetlands, areas within 200 feet of rivers and streams, wetlands banks, and land subject to flooding. The WPA regulates activities within 100 feet of bordering vegetated wetlands, an area called the buffer zone. However, current protections within the wetland buffer zone are very limited, and the WPA does not currently provide for a no disturb zone around wetlands. Here, the red arrow shows the areas I just listed that are currently regulated under the Wetlands Protection Act. However, for some of these areas, such as the buffer zone around the wetlands, the protections of the Wetlands Protection Act are very limited. Areas where we seek to increase protections through passing a local bylaw. The aim of the bylaw is to extend protections to isolated wetlands and vernal pools and to ensure protection of the first 25 feet of buffer zone. In other words, the 25 feet of land adjacent to wetlands. Okay, more on what are buffer zones. Buffer zones are the land adjacent to wetlands, water bodies, rivers, and banks. The Wetlands Protection Act regulates buffer zones by requiring that projects and activities land within 100 feet of wetlands undergo review before the work is started. This adjacent land within 100 feet of a wetland is what I'm referring to when I say buffer zone. Buffer zones not only help to protect the wetlands they border, they also have important ecological functions of their own. However, although the WPA requires review of projects planned within the buffer zone, it provides very little protection of the buffer zone itself, despite the fact that buffer zones serve many important functions, some of which I'll review in a moment. Here I'm showing photos of two different wetlands and their buffer zones. The first photo is from the Wakefield Town Forest. For this wetland, this area is the buffer zone. This buffer zone is an area of trees and shrubs. It has minimal disturbance and no significant building or alteration for quite some distance from the wetland. This intact buffer zone retains most or all of its natural habitat and wetland protection functions. The second photo is at Lake Quannapowitt. The land adjacent to the lake is the buffer zone out to 100 feet from the lake. This buffer zone retains a thin strip of undisturbed vegetation. This strip of vegetation provides some important functions such as providing wildlife habitat and pollution prevention, but because of the amount of alteration and removal of vegetation, it provides fewer functions than the less disturbed buffer zone in the previous photo. The third photo is also at Lake Quannapowitt. This land adjacent to the lake is the buffer zone. This buffer zone is developed and built up in the form of a parking lot and walking path. It's still the buffer zone, but it's lost much of its natural ability to protect the wetland from pollution and to provide wildlife habitat to wetland-dependent plants and animal species. The strip of lawn provides some protective functions against pollution, but much less compared to buffer zones that are wider and less disturbed and altered, and it provides less habitat for native wildlife. Okay, returning to the purpose of the bylaw. Passing a wetlands protection bylaw would further a number of key objectives. First, wetlands and their buffer zones protect property by mitigating the effects of flooding. Wetlands and buffer zones not only store floodwaters caused by heavy rains, they also absorb excess floodwaters into the ground. By protecting wetlands, we enhance Wakefield's climate resilience. Wetlands and buffer zones also improve water quality and prevent algal blooms. by filtering pollutants as well as other debris and contaminants from water. Algal blooms occur regularly in Lake Quannapowitt during the summer. Algal blooms decrease oxygen in the water and can sicken humans, animals, and pets, and they prevent using Lake Quannapowitt for recreation when they're active. Protecting wildlife habitat. Both the wetlands and their buffer zones provide core habitat for wildlife species, including amphibians, insects, birds, reptiles, and mammals. In Massachusetts, most animal species that depend on either wetlands or buffer zones depend on both over the course of their lifespan. So we want to pass a bylaw to increase protections of the buffer zone over what is currently provided in the Wetlands Protection Act, which is minimal. Again, the Wetlands Protection Act provides very little protection of buffer zones. I'll provide one example of how one wetland species depends on both wetland and buffer zone at different stages of its life cycle. This familiar bluet is a jewel-colored native damselfly. It's related to dragonflies, but is smaller and more slender than a dragonfly. This particular familiar bluet was photographed at Lake Quannapowitt as it was perched on a wetland plant. The familiar bluet starts out life as eggs, which are laid on aquatic vegetation near the surface of water. After hatching as nymphs, the bluet moves into the aquatic habitat where it lives out the nymph stage of its life and molts several times. After its final molt, it leaves the water by climbing up emergent vegetation, that is, plants whose roots are in the water but whose stems and leaves stick out from the water. Bluets then migrate to upland areas for their adult portion of their lives. The upland is a drier and higher area of land away from the wetland. As an adult, the bluet hunts over wetlands and near wetlands, and similarly mates over or near wetlands, and the life cycle begins again. The familiar bluet is not a rare species, but like many wetland species, including many insects, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals, it depends on both wetland and buffer zone to complete its life cycle and reproduce. So in the bylaw, when we say that we want to protect the buffer zone, we propose to do that by adopting a 25-foot no disturb zone around protected wetlands. In other words, protection of the buffer zone would focus primarily on the first 25 feet of the buffer zone. Next, I'll talk about vernal pools and why vernal pools are important to wildlife. Vernal pools serve a very specific and important role in wildlife habitat. Because vernal pools are dry for a significant portion of the year, they do not support adult fish populations. This provides a naturally protected habitat in which amphibians can breed and grow without predation by fish. Amphibians serve an important ecological function as both predators of insects and as prey for other wildlife. Many amphibian species depend on vernal pools for their life cycle, so we want to increase protections of these special wetlands in Wakefield. Wood frogs are one species of amphibian that require vernal pools for their life cycle. This photograph is of a vernal pool located in Wakefield, photographed during the early spring months when the pool holds water. Wood frogs start out their life cycle as eggs, which are laid and fertilized in the water of the vernal pool in early spring. After hatching, the tadpoles live in the vernal pool where the lack of fish increases their chances of surviving to adulthood. Wood frogs metamorphosize in the vernal pool, after which, as young frogs, they leave the vernal pool and migrate upland. As adults, they live for years in the upland habitat, but they return to the vernal pool each year to mate and deposit their eggs. These photos of wood frog eggs, a wood frog tadpole, and an adult wood frog were all taken. I'll show you a couple of photos from a couple of vernal pools located here in Wakefield. These photos were taken in the Wakefield Town Forest, which includes several certifiable vernal pools, but pools that are not yet certified. As I said before, under the Wetlands Protection Act, vernal pools are only protected when they're certified and when they exist within the jurisdictional area of another wetland. Vernal pools that are isolated or are not certified are not protected under the Wetlands Protection Act. The local bylaw would protect vernal pools that are not certified and vernal pools that are isolated from other wetlands. On the left is the vernal pool in March of this year, when the pool was wet. At this time of year, the male wood frogs are looking for a mate, and their vocalizations form a chorus. And I'll play this, and the wood frogs, you'll hear sound like ducks. On the right is the vernal pool this month. When the pool is dry, the pool is overgrown with devil's beggar ticks and other wetlands plants. The pool is dry, and you can see that the site is more terrestrial than aquatic at this time of year. There's still wildlife this time of There's still wildlife this time of year, but the wood frog sounds have been replaced with insects. The woodpecker. This vernal pool has not yet been certified, so it would not be protected under the Wetlands Protection Act. Based on its location, this vernal pool would likely be protected under the Wetlands Protection Act if it were certified. However, other vernal pools in Wakefield would not fall within the protections of the Wetlands Protection Act, even if they were certified. And I'll show you one of those pools. This vernal pool is located near the previous one, also in the Wakefield Town Forest. On the left is the vernal pool during its dry season of fall. On the right is the vernal pool in early spring this year during the portion of the year in which the vernal pool is wet. In spring of this year, trail cameras were used to collect video and audio of this and several other vernal pools. The cameras captured wood frog chorus, which will help in certifying the vernal pool, and also captured some of the other wildlife that frequent the vernal pools. I'll play just 1 minute of this video compilation from this vernal pool cluster. In this video, the vernal pool picture on the left is numbered pool number 1. Okay, and the video also picks up a herd of deer in the vernal pool, cluster. With the bylaw, we want to protect these special wetlands in Wakefield vernal pools. The last reason why we want to protect wetlands and their buffer zones in Wakefield, but residents of Wakefield care very strongly about Wakefield's natural resources and consider them a key feature of Wakefield's character. There was very strong consensus in the Wakefield Vision 2030 resident survey that Wakefield residents want to protect and enhance its natural features, with percent of survey respondents agreeing with that goal. For this reason, the Wakefield Vision 2030 statement begins, "We envision a Wakefield that protects and enhances its beautiful natural landscape." Wakefield is one of relatively few communities in this part of the state that is not adopted a wetlands protection bylaw. Statewide, 63% of communities have adopted a wetlands bylaw, while in eastern Massachusetts, the rate is 83%. All of the communities surrounding Wakefield have passed wetlands protection bylaws, and many communities have adopted their bylaw through the town meeting process, as we hope to do. How did we draft this bylaw? Our bylaw proposal adopts much of the language proposed by the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commission's model bylaw, which was most recently updated in 2000 across the state over the past couple of decades as a basis for local wetland protection bylaws. We also reviewed norms for what other communities around the state and regionally are using for their bylaws to ensure that we're not too far afield from what other communities are adopting. The protections we propose in our bylaw draft are consistent with what other municipalities are using across the state, including protecting isolated wetlands and vernal pools, identifying a buffer zone for these resources of 100 feet, and protecting a 25-foot no disturb zone around protected wetlands. Compared with nearby communities and communities with similar wetland resources to Wakefield, our bylaw draft is very consistent in terms of the resources that are protected and in proposing the 25-foot no disturb zone. Okay, what is the process to pass a wetlands bylaw? We are holding a series of public information sessions to discuss with the public the need for a bylaw, the features of the bylaw, and hear your questions and comments about the bylaw. Over upcoming meetings, including later tonight, we'll be discussing comments and feedback and incorporating these into our draft of the bylaw. When we have a final bylaw proposal, we'll submit a warrant article to town meeting. Wetlands and buffer zones. Okay. Right, we'll open up for questions, comments, and feedback.
Thanks, Jennifer. That was a good comprehensive presentation. I guess at this point, we are open for public comments on the proposal as it's been presented. What comments or questions? So I would ask people to raise their hand, use the raise hand function on your screen so that I can call on you and we can maintain some order in the discussion. And obviously, please identify yourself as you do speak. Tom McDonald, I think, has raised his hand. Tom?
I have a question. I live on Old Street, the corner of Drury Lane, and there are, I guess, river on the other side.
Tom, you're cutting in and out. You're gonna have to lean in close to your microphone, I think. Please. Tom? Tom, we can't hear you at all right now.
I'm going to and
maybe come back to Tom?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to. Tom, we'll
Okay.
come back to you if you can get your microphone working. Appears you may have some problems. I see a big red X over your camera on the screen here right now. Does anyone else want to speak? I see Robert Sentinelli.
Hey, good
Robert.
evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, very nice presentation. Good goal. I wonder if you could tell me, would this bylaw have any effect on the business people in the industrial zone where we get that annual or frequent flooding down there from the creek? Or is this all going to be, um, I don't know if you can say it's grandfathered, but is there any effect on those businesses in that industrial zone? Of course, that's a big wetlands area also.
Jennifer, I can't hear you right now.
Okay, sure. So, I think the guidance from the commission for questions about how does the bylaw affect your property or where you live in particular? And the guidance is to, if you have wet areas or flooding of your property or near your property, then it's a good idea to speak with the conservation agent about determining whether, first of all, the Wetlands Protection Act that's already in effect applies to your property, and I think the advice would be the same with the bylaw. It sounds like it sounds like there's regular flooding in the area, which makes me think that the area might already be covered under the Wetlands Protection Act. Land that's subject to flooding is a resource area for the bylaw. There's not a plan to, as of our current draft, to put a buffer zone around. So in that sense, absent any vernal pools around you, I don't think there would be a big difference between, what the jurisdiction is now for your area or under the bylaw. But, the recommendation of the Conservation Department is to always consult with the department when you have wet areas on your property or near your property, because your property might include someone else's or might include buffer zone for a wetland that's actually on someone else's property.
Is there anything in your proposal that's going to affect these businesses as they exist today? That was the
Well,
question.
things that would affect your businesses differently from today would be if your business has isolated wetlands around it, or a pool around it.
Well, I'd say
Again,
that whole area is an isolated wetlands. I mean, I'm no conservationist in terms of where that water is originating from, but it seems to be on the easterly side of the street, coming from, I mean, it was back behind Nacelle, if I remember, from Little League days. Well, second question, I don't know, maybe you can find out if they can be affected from someone and address that at one of your future meetings. You mentioned, I thought you said vernal pools weren't covered under the Wetlands Protection Act. And then, is that the case or is that not the case?
vernal pools are only covered under the Wetlands Protection Act when they are certified as vernal pools and when they occur within the jurisdiction of another wetland. So only when they happen to be next to or near a wetland that is jurisdictional. If a vernal pool is isolated, if it's sort of by itself at a distance from other wetlands, if it's not certified, then it's not currently covered by the Wetland Protection Act.
And who certifies them, Jennifer? Is the state, Division of Fisheries, who certifies these vernal pools? You say somebody's got to certify.
Yeah, usually it's people with education and experience in collecting data to show that the vernal pool meets certain criteria. That data is submitted to the state's Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, which makes the decision based on the evidence whether there's enough evidence to certify it as a vernal pool.
Okay, so anybody can say it's a vernal pool and then they take it to the state and then they present what they found in the state. Who certifies? The state?
Yes.
And which division in the state certifies a vernal pool? I mean,
The
if they do
Natural
this already, why are we doing it over again? I mean, I see other cities have done it in the towns, but why this now?
So the agency is the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. I don't know how they make individual decisions, based on credentials, but I think it's largely based on data that they can observe. And today there are vernal pools that are isolated, they're not near other wetlands, and even if they were certified, they would still not be covered under the Wetlands Protection Act. So this bylaw would extend protections to those.
When you presented the slide, last one, I don't want to, you presented the slide about the resource that you used. There was an organization that mapped the wetlands in Wakefield. Did they map the vernal pools? Or what exactly did they do? What is the name of the organization? What did they do? And is that inventory of wetlands and vernal pools available?
Yes, so the mapping and the data about locations in that map is, is collected and entered into the map by the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. They also identify potential vernal pools. Again, and this is true all over the state. Maps that are available of wetlands, are not assumed to be complete. So looking at maps might be a very first step in getting an impression about
Right.
wetlands in an area, but it really depends on sometimes it can be as simple as having conservation agent take a look at the area. It may be very clear cut, but sometimes it requires a delineation by someone with education and experience, like a wetland scientist, to delineate the wetland and say for certain if it's a wetland, what kind. That may be necessary. It can't be determined or decided on just by maps. And if you look at a map and it looks like there's no wetlands around you, that doesn't mean there's no wetlands around you.
Okay, so it's not definitive. It's a map, not a list,
It's not comprehensive.
and it's not definitive.
Robert, you were asking
Listen.
earlier about industrial areas. You talking about the Edgewater area off of Audubon Road in the northeast part of the town?
No. I'm talking about New Salem Street down past the cement plant, and where you get down to Foley's Tire and and an auto dealership. That road, it just floods, and it's all wetlands down there behind him. So I'm wondering if this bylaw would affect those businesses down there as they now exist, because I don't, they may get flooded. I know the road gets flooded. I've gone, slowly through it. It's like a foot high of water there.
The way I think of it is it's hard for us to, change the conditions that we have today. But with a bylaw, so we have that industrial area. The hope is with a bylaw, if we start protecting the buffer zone, and we require people as they're doing new development to leave that vegetation intact, that will absorb water and prevent so much of it from going downstream. In terms of the businesses that are already there, if you have a parking lot and it's already within a certain distance of, the river or a wetland, you're pretty much covered under the Wetlands Protection Act. So I think this is where Bill is really helpful, to have him, as we have proposed exemptions, for minor projects. So, we're just fine tuning that to make sure it addresses, people's concerns. Because if you already have, for example, a yard or parking lot, we're not going to require you to suddenly, dig it up and put in vegetation. It's there. So it's kind of drawing a line in the sand and setting some new standards going forward. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay. And then the last comment, Robert, is there are not a lot of vernal pools in Wake. It's not like there is a huge quantity of them. So for most homeowners do not have a vernal pool in their backyard. It's probably already been filled in. So I'll leave it with that. And thank you for your question. All these questions are very helpful.
Well, you can have a vernal pool and it can disappear. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, there are definitions in there of, you know, during most years. What is most years? Is it 6 out of 10? I mean, it's pretty vague.
Mhm.
And the applicant has to, you know, pay for the professionals that the commission wants to use, the consultants, to verify whether there's a pool or not a pool there. I mean, it says predatory fish. I mean, there's a lot in there that that could present problems to someone who wanted to develop private property.
Robert, anything else?
No, thank you. That's good.
Yeah.
Rose
Good
Barrett
job.
was next with
Mhm.
her hand up. Rose,
Hello.
hi.
Hi. My name is Rose Barrett, and I am a property owner in Wakefield. First and foremost, I'd like to say I am not in opposition to the protection of our wetlands, but I am opposed to unnecessary duplication and over-regulations, which from hearing some things right now, it seems to be happening with this bylaw. Massachusetts already has a robust and comprehensive Wetlands Protection Act that governs the preservation and protection of our wetlands. The Wetlands Protection Act sets clear standards, enforces compliance, and provides a framework that balances environmental stewardship with property rights and economic development. Local bylaws often introduce additional layers of bureaucracy, vague language, and discretionary enforcement. It can create confusion for homeowners, small businesses, and developers who are already navigating a complex regulatory landscape. And I've attended some of the Conservation Commissions for wetlands, and that's definitely happening. In many cases, these bylaws, such as the one being proposed, go beyond the scope of the state law, imposing stricter setbacks, contradictory definitions, and a more burdensome permitting process. Let's be clear, the Wetlands Protection Act is not a loophole, is not a watered down version of protection. It is a well-established science-based policy that has been refined over decades. It includes public hearings, sometimes it's many public hearings, Conservation Commission oversight, DEP oversight, and enforcement mechanisms. Adding a local bylaw risks creating inconsistency, legal ambiguity. I think it's kind of, we just heard from the previous questions, and unnecessary delays. Moreover, we must consider the impact on our community. Residents who want to build a deck, build an addition, install a pool, install a shed, or improve drainage on their property shouldn't have to hire a lawyer and consultants to interpret overlapping regulations. We should be encouraging responsible construction and property improvements, not discouraging it with red tape. If the concern is enforcement, then let's strengthen our local conservation commission's ability to work within the state framework. If the concern is education, then let's invest in outreach and awareness. But duplicating laws doesn't solve problems, it creates them. I urge this board to reconsider the adoption of a local wetland bylaw. Let's respect the integrity of the state law, avoid regulatory overreach, and focus our energy on collaboration, not complication. And I also have a couple of questions. I was reading the bylaw, and the bylaw references regulations to be adopted. And I didn't find those on the website as I was reading it. Have they been drafted, or are they available?
We are working on those. Actually, before you move on, can I just address some of your comments?
Yes.
Thank you very much for reaching out to us. And if you wish to email your comments to us, that's really helpful. We're a 3-member board. And obviously we're deliberating internally. And for us, it is incredibly productive to hear from a variety of viewpoints. My first question for you is, have you ever attended a Wakefield Conservation Commission meeting?
Yes, I have in the past.
Okay. I think we're reasonable. I understand from your perspective, you're concerned about being burdensome. And I think we have to, make sure we fine tune the sausage in in our wetlands bylaw to make sure it works for everyone. But I would say our goal is not to duplicate efforts. If, a 25-foot setback, you're already covered under the Wetlands Protection Act. Your work, whatever you're doing, is jurisdictional. It's that 25-foot setback we're looking to do, which is standard to a lot of, pretty much 83% of other communities. So we're not trying to charge more money. We would work to streamline the application. Pretty much everything is the same. I think the only thing that would be different and new is the vernal pools and the vegetated isolated wetlands. I would say the second issue is, I don't know if you're following what is going on with the state, but currently the state is working on initiatives to facilitate development closer to sensitive areas, solar farms, battery parks, housing. And, there was draft legislation that came out earlier this summer, repealing, basically rolling back some of the Wetlands Protection Act. So if that happens, we would be one of the few communities left without a local bylaw in place. And so for me, that's what creates the urgency, and also thinking about the need for clean water, and keeping that a high priority, and the flood prone areas in Wakefield. But honestly, we're taxpayers too. We're not looking to create burdens on people. We're looking to find the right balance of achieving the goal and not onerous regulation. So I appreciate your question. And again, we welcome you to email your comments to the commission mailbox, because it's helpful for us to refer back to it.
Eleanor, can you
Well,
speak
okay, go ahead.
Eleanor, can you speak to the exemption question? I thought there would be exemptions, for example, for converting lawn to other uses, deck or pool, small pools and that kind of stuff.
So that is the Wetlands Protection Act exemption is currently written today. We have, give me 1 second, I'm pulling it up. We have an emergency exemption, and then we have essentially routine maintenance exemption. And as worded, it's maintaining, repairing, replacing, but not substantially changing or enlarging an existing structure. And then we have one related to utilities, but certainly we would welcome, feedback that if we need to broaden it.
I understand everything you've said. I guess one of the big things is, I also, a taxpayer, and I know people who bought in Wakefield, families starting off, and they're going to be adding on to their land, is to have these forums, yet there's regulations out there that you can enact, but we don't know what they are. To be adopted, but it's not there for us to be able to comment on. And I can say is the more regulations there are, the more complicated it gets. And then one person thinks it's one way, someone else thinks it's another way. And I find it basically impedes upon, people's property rights of all these things. And I understand people on housing, I understand states doing all sorts of things for green energy, hence the solar, etc. However, I just don't feel it's right to ask for comments when the regulations aren't out there for people to be able to comment on and know what they're going to be. Especially since I'd see on there that this would only require a simple majority to pass, does not require the 2/3, such as I believe a zoning bylaw does. So it's easier in essence to get this passed because it's only a simple majority. So I just feel if you're gonna go the public should know everything out there as to what you're trying to do with all regulations.
Okay, thank you,
Yep,
Rose.
thank you. We've gotten that feedback.
I think Chip Tarbell had his hand up.
Mm-hmm.
Chip?
Sorry, needed to unmute. Chip Tarbell, 23 Morrison Road.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly appreciate what you guys are doing and the work you're doing. However, I just want to talk about the procedure a little bit. And I think Rose brought up a great point about the regulations not being known. And I think if you're trying to put this forward to the fall town meeting, that you're trying to jam it down into people that you shouldn't. I think there needs to be a lot more time to understand the regulations you want to create, to understand how new development will be affected by the bylaws that you're proposing. And I also just think this fall town meeting, no fault of yours, is going to be horrendously bylaw heavy, right? We've got the recodification coming up. We've just had ADUs. The bylaws are getting hit left and right. And I think there needs to be more time, as Rose stated, in figuring out what the regulations are, having people look at them, having people understand the difference of this bylaw versus the Wetlands Protection Act. I mean, you already have setbacks. You already have the ability, people have to come in front of you if they're trying to develop near a wetland. You already can put criteria and conditions on what they can do and what they can't do. So I'm still struggling with why we need this. Why do we need this extra level? Why do we, and I need to understand it more. I think, to have more presentation. I need to know what the regulations are. And those would be my couple of comments. I don't disagree with any of it, other than I need to be more educated about it. And I think a lot of us do. That would be my comments.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments, Chip. I appreciate the thought and the question. Paul Rubicki, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Paul Rybicki from Parker Road in Wakefield. I just wanted to thank the Conservation Commission for the effort to put this forward. And I think time is of the essence. Time has shown that the developments in town have been in need of potentially more oversight. The vocational school minimum buffer is only 2 foot. So, there's been such, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but bottom line, I'm grateful. I don't think it's that complicated. I think the time is of the essence. I don't think it's undue duplication. I think there's a climate currently that there's lessening federal protections for the environment with that happening. And over 80% of the Eastern Mass communities with a wetland protection bylaw. This bylaw I've reviewed, it doesn't look complicated. I understand that there's some fine tuning required, but I think that it is something that is urgent. And I'm extremely grateful for the Conservation Commission to be going forward and putting the effort to do this. And I respectfully disagree with the other people talking about duplicating and overly complicated. I think that's a smokescreen for doing the right thing and protecting the valuable resources that get stepped on in our town and in our state and our country. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your thoughts, Paul. Appreciate that. Anyone else wishing to speak? I see Brian McGrail has his hand up. Brian, I guess you're next.
Thank you, Paul. Let me find my camera. I like to turn my camera on.
Sure.
Appreciate the forum. I think that Mr. Tabell made a good point. I think, with all due respect, at this point in time, I think the town is a little bit bylawed out. We've got the MBTA, the ADU, the floodplain, the recodification, which I virtually went to every one of those meetings and participated. I'm not against this. I'm never against the bylaw. I would participate in this. I just think it needs work. It needs time. I think the Springtown meeting would be appropriate for that. Because it does need a lot of review. You know, I understand and I go before your commission. I do think you're very reasonable and fair, and I commend you for that, but commissions change over time. And we all have to be cognizant of that. You don't have two members sitting there now. As you know, those positions have to be filled. So you don't know where a commission's gonna be. I've been practicing land use law in this town for 35 years. And there was a time that the zoning board went from a 3-member board to a 5-member board for a reason. And because boards change and things happen. As far as some specific things, to give you some feedback, on the bylaw, I think it's important that you have to put a provision in for exemption for existing projects and projects in progress. That is critical because when you have a general bylaw, there's no grandfather protection like it is with zoning. So you could have projects that are approved now, are financed and ready to go. And if this bylaw went into effect, it could affect them. And it really could affect those properties and those property owners and lenders. So, you know, trying to be constructive, if I could share my screen, Paul, is that possible?
Sure, I think so.
To give the commission some ideas on this as you move forward. You know, language, and again, this is just kind of rough, but something like this. Exemption for existing and pending approval. So notwithstanding any provisions of this bylaw to the contrary, the following projects shall be exempt from the requirements. So approved projects, any development, construction, or land use project that has received an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission prior to the effective date of this bylaw. And then projects in the approval process, any development, construction, or land use project for which a notice of intent application has been submitted to the Conservation Commission and is under active review as of the effective date of the bylaw. I think those would be appropriate and needed to have clarity. Otherwise, you could have properties and projects and banks and lenders in absolute chaos and limbo.
Brian, would you send those over to us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, I'm trying to give you feedback.
No, I appreciate the feedback on that.
Yeah.
And I think we do need to spend some time on developing exemption, language around exemptions that deals with these issues as well as some of the other questions we've heard tonight.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that, Paul.
Thank you.
And then, you know, I just wanted to point out, as far as the setback goes, I struggle with that. You know, your commission has had a 25-foot setback policy for years. And you've worked with people on that, and people have worked with you, and I don't think it's ever become a contentious thing. I think it's always been worked out. I think most people adhere to it. It's kind of known in Wakefield that that's the goal. If you can't make it, the commission's always shown a willingness to work with people on that, especially if there's mitigation or safeguards put in place to protect the wetlands. But when you start putting in there, shall presume, I think it's getting pretty strong, and that 25-foot setback for a lot of properties, especially residential. I mean, if you have somebody with a backyard, and they're in the buffer zone, you know, you're taking 25 feet of their property that they can't do something with. So I would suggest to think about softening that or wordsmithing it a little bit. And softening it. You know, I just don't like shall presume. You know, maybe it's stated it's a goal of the commission or something like that. And then, you know, I had a question. Do we know how many vernal pools there would be in Wakefield that aren't vernal pools now that would qualify as vernal pools under this? Is there any idea on that? Just out of curiosity.
Today, I don't know if any of the commissioners do, but I will try to find out that information for an upcoming session.
I don't know if it's easy to find, maybe it's impossible to find out, Jennifer. I don't know if it's like something you could even, you might not be able to do it. I mean, it might be like you have to, it's probably difficult. I was just curious. So if there's not, I was just, you know, kind of a question.
Yeah. And that was for any maps. Yeah.
Well, you showed some vernal pools examples that are in the town forest.
Yeah.
At least neither of which have been certified based on what you said. And one of which probably couldn't be certified under current regulation because it's not associated with another wetland complex. Am I correct in my understanding of what you said in your presentation?
So there, that even if they are certified, they will still not be covered under the Wetlands Protection Act
That's correct. Yeah,
that we know
yeah,
of.
so
that are-
because unless they're associated with with another regulated wetland or wetland buffer, they would not be covered under the WPA, would not be protected in any way.
So then, I just wanted to add on the regulations part of it. I would respectfully suggest that there not be a right to adopt regulations, whatever those regulations are, need to be part of this bylaw. The way it's written now is extremely powerful. What it says, following public hearing, the commission may promulgate rules and regulations to effectuate the purpose of this bylaw. So that's the equivalent of saying to the zoning board of appeals, you can change your zoning bylaws. It gives an incredible amount of power to the Conservation Commission. With lack of town oversight, because, except for the appointment to the commission, with all due respect. So I think that, any regulations that are gonna impact property owners should be in this bylaw and voted on at town meeting and understood. And if they're gonna be changed, they have to go to town meeting. And again, not to question you folks, I think you would probably be very reasonable with your regulations, but this is a bylaw that's gonna be in effect for a long time, and new commissioners come in, and next thing you know, they're by regulation, they're changing that 25 feet to 30 or 35. Who knows what could be done with regulations. So, that was brought up earlier by other folks in comments. So I think that really needs to be put out there, and I think you're working on that. That needs to be put out to the community and have input and discussion on that before this goes to town meeting. And the last thing I wanted to mention, just so everybody knows, one of the, I deal with local bylaws and other communities that I permit in, and one of the things that folks have to be cognizant about. One of the earlier speakers talked about, the state regulation, the state regulation is enough, and the cost and expense. So a real cost and expense to a local bylaw is if, for example, you issue an order of conditions, now you have to issue, in essence, two order of conditions or a combined order of conditions, one for the state and one for our local bylaw. So if I get those order of conditions as a property owner, now if a neighbor wants to appeal me, the way it works now with the state, the way we have it is that gets appealed to DEP. And DEP handles that. When there's a local bylaw, it gets very expensive and time consuming, because now on the state order of conditions that you issue, the appeal goes to DEP. And in the local order of conditions you issue, it goes to Superior Court. So now you've got two cases in two different venues going on, which are a nightmare, because it's like trying to herd cats. You've got two different judicial jurisdictions that you're dealing with, in essence, dealing with two cases. And there's nothing you folks can do about that. That's the way it is in all towns that have local bylaws. It's just the way it is. But I think the community needs to understand that, it is a little bit of a different process for them as property owners if they end up in litigation, either appealing you, or if you issue an order and it gets appealed by an abutter. So, what I would say is, I think I would respectfully suggest, I think it would be good for the community for you to keep having these info sessions and working meetings, albeit as many as I can. I'll participate and try to help with the language. I don't want to be, I never am historically an obstructionist. I want to work on these things as a citizen. But I think it's important for you to send a clear message to the community. We're not going forward in the fall. I think there's a lot of anxiety out there from some of the speakers that you've heard and things that I've heard around town and Mr. Tabell touched on it, but it feels like it's a little bit of a force going on, and maybe not intentionally, but there just seems to be a sense about that, maybe we haven't had a wetlands bylaw forever, maybe there's an urgency, okay, we want to do it. It's not that it has to be done in November. To do it in May is okay too. I don't think there's anything that's going to be a real problem for that. I think you'll have a much greater chance of success if you get those regulations, put them in the bylaw, vet them out, let's work them out, and go in a unified fashion to town meeting in the spring. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for your comments, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. If you have those suggestions, we would, include those with your, like the setback policy you mentioned, and I think you mentioned softening language, and the piece about the regulations. We'd be happy to look at it. Again, I think we're trying not to be overly burdensome.
And I don't think you are. I respect
Yeah.
that. So I'm happy to provide that for your
Yeah.
contribution.
And sorry, if I might just add, we have not yet voted to go to town meeting. I would say I'm a taskmaster and a little bit, how can I say this? I want to create some urgency on the part of the commission and just dedicate some time to this, because we've been working since the fall of 2024. The plan was take it to the spring, and then we said, oh, it's going to be too rushed. Let's take it to the fall. Well, the fall is here and it's been rushed, and we need to set up meetings for ourselves to just create a deadline and get create some urgency, create an opportunity for feedback. We sent out a survey for a full month. We've tried to slot in some times to our meetings, but we just have not been getting the feedback. So I do appreciate, you and other people coming in and sharing this with us, because it's really what we need to hear to make an informed decision before we take something to town meeting.
Yeah, this process is what will make it work.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
I do want to add just a point of clarification, to one of the comments about appeals of the bylaw going to both DEP and to Superior Court. So an appeal would require a submission of appeal to DEP and Superior Court, but DEP's policy is to essentially pause the administrative appeal process while the appeal proceeds in Superior Court, so it would not require trying to move forward to essentially court cases at the same time.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be at cross purposes with Superior Court.
the only problem with that is, so I'm in Superior Court, check the docket. So if I have an appeal, my case will probably be heard in 2027 in Superior Court if it goes to trial. So that's the other thing you have to think about. People are going to get significantly delayed if it ends up being appealed in the court.
It's quite a delay. Anything else? Thank you, Brian. Bronwyn Della Volpe, I think you are next. You've had your hand up a bit.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. I appreciate the presentation. Sort of a technical question regarding the regulations. Are there draft regulations written now?
We're in the process of reviewing draft materials that staff have developed, but we haven't yet, I think, discussed them among ourselves to be prepared to bring them forward, unless someone knows something more than I do.
No, I think our thought process, Bronwyn, was to button up the bylaw and make sure we were comfortable with, the core aspects, and we weren't debating parts of the bylaw, and then move to the regulations so they're in sync with the bylaw, and we're not running sort of having to edit sort of two documents at the same time.
The bylaw seems fairly solid, maybe a little tweaking here and there. So since I consider, I agree with other people that the bylaw is more complete with the regulations being included. Is there an estimated time when those will be available, either for review or to bring in other boards and committees that need to weigh in on them? Or how does that process work for the regulation aspect of the bylaw?
Our hope is to use the extra time that we have allocated for additional meetings to work on those. Sometimes our typical hearings are going 3 hours, and so it's really hard to tackle the bylaw during our standard meetings.
Yes, I've definitely noticed that, and you know, I've been a little bit frustrated because the bylaw, as you said, guys have been working on this for about a year or so now, and so many other things have been on the agenda that that this just seems to be like everything else. There's too much to discuss. So, who was responsible for writing up the agenda and the priorities on that?
Which agenda?
The General Conservation
Oh.
Commission agenda, meeting agendas.
Ethan puts together the agenda and then circulates it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, myself as the agent as well as the commission clerk, we receive items throughout the week and put them on the agenda as they come in.
Are they put on the agenda in the order that they're received?
We have as a priority the items open to public hearing at the top, and then following that, they tend to come under other discussion. It just depends what's ongoing. Some are being discussed week to week, and the other times they could come in earlier or later, or we might have people there discussing it. So there's many factors that go into how the agenda is made.
Right. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So these hearings are very helpful to me, and I'm sure they seem to be very helpful to you as well. Has there been specific time set aside for the commission to just have like working meetings so they can just wrangle through the regulations? Has that been set aside yet?
Not
So
in-
these meetings that we've scheduled, really serve kind of those purposes of both doing the presentation, having a public comment section, and then time for us to meet. And our agenda includes time for discussion too.
I'm sorry,
that's our-
I couldn't hear you. So was that a yes? Meetings have been set aside to hash out the regulations?
Well, we have these four so far, special meetings scheduled. This is one of them. This is the first one that we've scheduled, and we do have, an agenda item on the agenda for the commission to discuss, feedback and work on, the bylaw. So yes.
But I meant specifically for the regulations.
Yeah, I think we'll use that time for the bylaw and for the regulations.
Thank you. I very much appreciate there's a lot of layers to this and a lot of time has been spent on it. And I think it's a needed thing. Wakefield is one of the very few towns without a wetlands bylaw. And I really don't think that homeowners should be terribly nervous about this, although some good questions were brought up. But I think that once this process goes through, that I think that those fears and misgivings would probably be allayed. So, but thank you very much for all of your efforts.
Thanks for your comments, Bronwyn.
Thanks, Brian.
I don't see any other hands raised. Are there anyone else who would like to comment tonight? You can also submit comments via email to us through the Conservation Commission's email.
Yep. I think, Paul, we received a letter that someone asked that be recorded into the meeting tonight.
Right.
I don't know if Ethan, you want to read that?
Sure, I'll share my screen in a second and you can read through it. we had received 2 letters, but here's the first. Let me know if you can see that completely.
Yeah.
I think you're supposed to read it. So it goes into the transcript.
Sure, I can read it then. It says, "Hello, Conservation Commissioners. Because of lack of adequate notice, I cannot attend, but I respectfully request that this be read into the record at tonight's forum. I am deeply disappointed by the lack of communication by the Commission regarding the proposed wetland bylaw. As a member of this community, I believe it's essential that such decisions be shared transparently and in a timely manner. The public not being adequately informed undermines trust and prevents meaningful participation. You scheduled a public forum for tonight with public notices of the same just last Friday. 2 days' notice is not acceptable. I sense that for some unknown reason you are trying to rush a wetland bylaw into place. Why? This wetland bylaw will have far-reaching impact on the citizenry of Wakefield, and they need to be clearly understood and vetted prior to enactment. It is my understanding that you are considering filing this for the fall town meeting with a deadline of October 2nd to do so, with your first public forum on September 23rd, again, not acceptable. I respectfully urge you to delay consideration of the proposed wetland bylaw until the Springtown meeting to allow expansive and meaningful public participation in the development of the wetland bylaw and any related regulations, which have yet to be published. I would rather support your efforts at the Springtown meeting than oppose them at the Fall Town meeting. Thank you for your consideration."
And that was submitted by Nicholas Ryan, who lives on Main Street.
Do we have anything on our website that says we're presenting at Fall Town meeting?
No,
Okay.
the commission hasn't voted that yet.
I think all of our language has been that we're discussing and we'll make a determination after we hear input from the public. Right? We're going to deliberate and make a decision. Okay. Are there any others, or is that it?
There's one more letter I'm pulling up at the moment.
Okay.
If one of you guys want to read it this time, that would be great.
Oh, I haven't seen this one before. Go ahead. Okay. It's addressed to me. Paul Wendell, yes, Concom Chair. Please read this into the record at tonight's meeting. I'm a licensed surveyor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and a resident of the town of Wakefield. While I applaud your commission on your hard work and efforts regarding a proposed wetland bylaw, I would respectfully suggest you wait until the spring town meeting to present it for consideration for the following reasons, which reflect both procedural prudence and fiduciary responsibility by your commission. The proposed bylaw represents a very significant shift in land use regulation with direct implications for property owners, developers, conservationists, town-owned properties, and citizens. Many citizens and stakeholders have not had adequate opportunity to review the draft, understand its implication, or provide informed feedback. A delay would allow for additional public hearings, workshops, and outreach efforts to ensure transparency and build trust before submitting it for the town meeting warrant. I have grave concerns about potential conflicts between the proposed bylaw, already existing town bylaws, and state or federal regulations, including the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, that need to be vetted. A delay would allow all stakeholders adequate time to review the draft and recommend revisions to ensure compliance and clarity. Lastly, there should be a detailed impact study conducted and presented to the community to eliminate risks of unintended consequences. Delaying consideration of the proposed bylaw is not a rejection of its intent, but a commitment to due diligence, inclusivity, and sound governance. By taking the time to refine the proposal, engage the public, and align with best practices, we can ensure that any future bylaw is both environmentally responsible and broadly supported. Thank you for your consideration. And this is signed by Paul Finocchio. Ethan, where did that come in?
That came into my email. Both of those letters we had received this afternoon.
Okay, I hadn't seen this one. Okay, thanks. So we have those two sets of comments, both of them essentially urging us to take some time before we move this forward and do a more comprehensive process.
Do we have any other people looking to speak?
I see no other hands up.
Okay. I'm wondering, since we have Bill on the line, we could talk through his comments and how we plan to address them in the draft bylaw, and also hear some of his other suggestions. I had talked with him earlier today and thought it might be a good idea for him to join.
Sure. I mean, I got a couple of minutes for you folks. So no, I applaud the effort. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to have a bylaw. It's, and I think the regulations are probably my most biggest comment. I mean, really, the regulations are what determine how you're regulating the bylaw. The bylaw is giving you the jurisdiction. The regulations are the ones that tell the public how that's going to happen. So, my big point is I don't think the average homeowner has any idea how this could potentially affect them if they have a wetland in their backyard. And we would need to be able to display that to some degree to them and explain it to them. And without the regulations written, we can't do that. So, from my perspective, I think it would be better that, we have some time to vet these things out. We've provided you a bunch of comments on exemptions for public works operations, so that we have the ability to kind of maintain the status quo related to our infrastructure maintenance. The exemptions that are provided today aren't really providing the same level of exemptions that we have currently, which I think is important. It's discussed in one of the exemption items that even the utilities and infrastructure still would have to meet rules and regulations that we don't have and we can't review. So, for me to provide substantive comments, I mean, they kind of go hand in hand. And for me to provide you with written comments, I would need to have all that information in front of me. So, I was very involved in my prior town that I worked in, writing the bylaw with the conservation agent and the rules and regulations for their conservation bylaw. So, I have a good amount of experience getting through this process. And, honestly, and I think I told you this, Eleanor, on the phone today, what I'm hearing from the folks today about, this being kind of moved very quickly, that's exactly what happened when I was in Concord. And they ended up deciding they actually even put it on the warrant, got so much pushback on it that they decided not to move it, and then came back the following town meeting with an updated set of bylaws that was vetted with town staff, and the town administrator was involved at the time. So a bunch of us all making sure that kind of everyone's had a consensus plan that went to town meeting. And I think that's what we want to do here. I mean, we want to support this. I definitely do. I just need to have the information to be able to actively evaluate it, understand what exemptions we're going to have, understand what you're trying to protect, because I have a lot of experience either applying for wetland permitting, or developing wetland regulations and bylaws, and obviously providing peer review for all this, which I will be doing for this bylaw as well. So I have a lot of thoughts on how we could get to certain points. I just need to understand exactly what you're trying to protect, and exactly how you're intending to provide exemptions that currently exist in the Wetland Protection Act, or what you're trying to remove. I think of single family lots where they don't have to have any stormwater regulations. They don't have to have stormwater calculations completed.
Right.
Are we keeping that exemption for single family homeowners? Are we not? Like all those types of questions, I think just need to be answered. And, you know, I'd love to be part of that conversation. As soon as you have drafts that I can review.
Bill, just for clarification, are you saying you would rather have us work with the bylaw and the regulations hand in hand at the same time?
Yeah,
That's
I
your
do. Yeah, I
preference.
think,
Okay.
yeah, I think it lets everybody know how you're going to regulate it, right? So again, bylaw gives you what you're trying to regulate. Regulations are telling you how you're going to regulate. So if we don't have that, I mean, essentially, you know, folks are voting on something that they don't know how it will actually affect them, which I wouldn't really support that. I don't think at town meeting.
Jennifer and Paul, something I had talked about with Bill potentially is just setting up sort of scheduling a special or, you know, just special time with him to go through the bylaw, you know, and his comments and help fine tune it. That might be useful. And we can try to figure out how to set that up with Ethan and Bill.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I would think it might be most effective to do it as staff and conservation agent with Bill. Question is, do you want to be present? Do you want one of the commissioners to be present at that meeting as well? Can't have more than one of us present, given our.
Well, we can. I usually have to post the meeting. That's all.
We'd have to do it as a public meeting, right?
Yeah.
Another
So yeah, I mean that's not a heavy lift, right? I mean,
Yeah.
right. I mean,
72 hours
we
notice.
do have a meeting scheduled for a
Okay.
week from now to carry on conversations, and so we could do it then.
Yeah.
I'm actually I have a commitment on that same day, unfortunately.
On the 30th?
So
Okay.
I would have a conflict for I'm available on the Wednesday, but I have conflicts on Tuesday and Thursday next week.
Yeah.
But I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be an evening one either. I mean, we can try to do this, you know, either towards the end of work hours, as long as we're, you know, taping these things. I think that would make a ton of sense. We could easily do that, and this way everybody understands what we're talking about, you know?
Yeah. And that's also helpful to have Elaine, Paul, because she has so much experience enforcing it and what's not enforceable. And so it's a good, you know, to have the two, you know, engineering and sort of the experienced agent looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
we'll look to schedule time with you to kind of go through that.
Okay.
We were going to issue you a response to your comments written. I think that was the plan.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, so as long as we get the comments written, I have an idea where you're looking to go, and then I can, you know, I can provide, you know, substantive feedback as opposed to just kind of the general stuff where we're just kind of highlighting, you know, initial concerns is kind of what you have right now. So.
No, I think that makes sense. We should try to put that together with Bill, Ethan, Elaine, and one of us. We can manage that. Or make it a public meeting and have all three of us present if it's late in the work.
Yeah.
The question is, I mean,
Whatever
I
you
don't have
folks
the
think is the
schedule
best
for you,
approach.
but it's more you two, Eleanor and Jennifer, who have schedule constraints because of job commitments. So we need to talk about that if we're going to try to do it more during working hours.
I think, you know, for me, a Friday is the easiest.
Okay.
And then you get Elaine. I don't know how that works for Jennifer, but we could also figure out the scheduling offline.
That's true. We can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, my concern is sort of buttoning things down on the sooner end and then having time to socialize going forward, you know,
Yeah, I think that's no, I think that's a good point, Eleanor, because most of the bylaws that come to town meeting, I mean, they're sort of, in final draft form to some degree that's been vetted, right, through some public input, and then you're getting the kind of the last input prior to putting it on the warrant. So, I mean, if you're thinking spring, and that's an option that the commission's considering, I mean, I'd be thinking you'd be wrapping things up by February, maybe March. That gives you a couple of months to work it out prior to, it getting to the warrant. So, I mean, that would be it still is a tight timeline, in my opinion. I mean, you have to get some feedback. You're going to want to have these regulations out for folks to at least understand it. I would highly recommend that the presentation kind of outline general scenarios for homeowners, and that would be pretty helpful for them too, to understand. Okay, hey, I have a wetland in the backyard. I have a house that's within the 25-foot. How are you going to regulate me? And just generally, I mean, what the thought process is. I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, in my mind, I don't want to speak for Jennifer and Paul. My thought is, yes, that I would want this buttoned up by the end of the year, and that we're not debating or, whether to do a 25-foot buffer, or, that we missed an exemption for new construction, as Attorney McGrail, mentioned, and that we're getting that feedback now.
Yeah, I think it's all, I think I had mentioned too this afternoon, one of the things, most of the bylaws is at least a quick little update to the town council. So, that usually gets folks, as soon as we do that, that's when everybody understands that it's coming on. If they're not necessarily catching this meeting, mostly everybody's watching the town council meetings. So at least a highlight to them to, let them know you're working on this, you started your first public meeting, all that type of stuff. I mean, that goes a long way. And then when you get to the final, kind of outline what you heard and what you tweaked, that's usually the way most folks do it. So that would be probably a good approach.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for those thoughts, Bill. Where do we want to go tonight?
Well, we can address Bill's questions and make sure we're in agreement. Because if there are any deal breakers, that's helpful to know.
Yeah.
Ethan, can you pull up the email that you sent writing up the key points? I think this was the email. Actually, I might have the recap of meeting with DPW.
Sure.
And then we can just talk to Bill how we are going to address it, and ink it and then send it back to you guys.
Sure.
If Jennifer and Paul, are you guys in agreement?
I think
I
it's,
want to check, are we moving on to item 3, which is addressing comments? And are we closing, or not closing, but moving on from public comment?
I think we can close from the public comment. Looking at the agenda item, I'm suggesting we move item 3 up before item 2, since we have Bill on the call. And then we can move back to item 2, incorporating feedback, because if Bill says, oh, yeah, that's not going to address my concerns, then we know we have a big open item we have to work on the bylaw.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. And for the public, just so you guys are aware, we cannot talk to each other. So,
we cannot deliberate.
We cannot
outside of
deliberate.
these meetings.
Correct. So the 3 of us are coming together for the first time to address these together and build consensus. And it feels a little different than other public boards. So just wanted to make that clear in case it was awkward. Okay. I think exemptions,
Yes.
we agree we need to work on exemptions. And I would say, this is just me answering, that our intent was not to regulate, regular road repair, salt use, and other maintenance, that we would include language to exempt that. So we can work through that. My suggestion would be expanding, maybe figuring out what types of exemptions we have. So it's, emergency, maybe there's utility,
Yep.
and then maybe there's minor project exemptions and homeowners. So we're open to your feedback on that and how you want to organize it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the road repair one is an exemption that's not, currently there. So you touched on the utilities. I think sewer was missing within that, or water. One of the two utilities that we maintain wasn't included. I think,
it was
potentially
sewer.
drainage.
Yeah,
Was it sewer that was missing,
I
Paul?
believe we missed sewer, you're right.
Yeah. And
Okay.
then, for road repair related stuff, I mean, what the WPA allows us to, essentially maintain things in kind, and not widen anything over a lane. That's the current standard. So, I mean, I would be comfortable with that, obviously. If we wanted to discuss something different, I mean, obviously I'm open to those conversations. Drainage activities too, that's kind of exempted within that same road repair piece. In my Concord days, we had a maintenance permit that incorporated some other items that I didn't write into the regulations because we had an ongoing maintenance permit that was administratively continued every 3 years. So we had kind of had an agreement on that. So that was good. And I think, those are kind of my first swipes at it. I think kind of understanding for folks, if you're a single family homeowner and you have an existing non-conforming, like those types of things, how you're planning to handle it, like not increase closer to the wetland, for example, right? Kind of like the ZBA does with a non-conforming structure, right? So same kind of ideas that you kind of lay out how you're going to handle it. So somebody that is proposing a project and any resident that's thinking about putting an addition on, they have at least the rules in front of them so they know how they should design their projects. And maybe some type of alternatives analysis if it can't be met and they have to encroach closer for whatever reason that I can't think of right now, that you at least identify how that would potentially happen. We did that within Concord with I think there was an appeal process or something, or a variance request you could ask for, and there was a whole thing. Some of it wasn't as clear as I probably would think it would be when we started administering it, but we should be able to hopefully get to something on that.
Yeah, I think the homeowners obviously want to understand how we're going to be regulating the
Right.
use of their property, and we need to get that sorted out pretty clearly here.
Yeah. I already talked about the regulation stuff, so I don't think we need to hammer that home.
Right.
Definitions, just in general, and I brought this up this afternoon with Eleanor. I really believe that you don't want to be having definitions in here that are not explicitly related to the bylaw. So any type of change of resource area or any definition for that, it runs just with this bylaw. So if you're missing parts of it, it's not included in the definition. So, or at least some language that says, in addition to the Wetland Protection Act, it's XYZ, something to that effect, just because most folks, in the industry understand how to delineate bank, delineate riverfront, delineate land underwater, BVW, all those things. They know how to do it. So, you know, the thing for me is, you know, clarifying the vernal pool, how you're gonna ask for that to be delineated, what information you'd want someone to provide you. Like that, those types of things need to be clarified, I think. So folks know how to do it, right?
That part we would put in the like we would define it here, and then we would put the how we're going to do it in the regulations, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Isolated wetlands piece. So that kind of had some discussion, I think, last Tuesday, when I watched the meeting. So depending on what your square footage is and how you're going to make it jurisdictional, some of that may need to be exempted for us because I don't know how I would be able to administer certain projects. So what the example I used was if there's a isolated wetland in someone's backyard, well, how am I going to know that that's there? You know, if I'm not discharging to it or if I'm not doing anything there, I wouldn't necessarily, you know, think to look for it, right? So, you know, if I have 100-foot buffer related to an isolated wetland, that would require me to come to you with either a request for determination of applicability, or if it was going to be something where I'm coming in with a, you know, an actual filing, you know, I need to know if I have to do that. And, you know, scouring backyards to determine if I'm within 100 feet doing a you know, new sidewalk expansion or something. I mean, that's a lot of lift for us to, you know, which I don't think we're really going to be providing a lot of value in that necessarily. So I think that would be a big piece for us to understand. And there may be ways with exemptions to eliminate that, so it's not a concern on our end. But you know, I don't even know how I would even attack it to come forward with you on projects like that, because I mean, I have to go into people's backyards, then they can tell me no. So, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so no, you can't come here. Okay. So
I hadn't
that,
thought
that
about the question of sidewalk on the street and 100-foot buffer from a wetland that you haven't seen.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's a tough one for us.
That's a challenge, yes.
Bill, a question about that, because
Yep.
I've been thinking about this one since you mentioned it to me. So the Wetlands Protection Act, it provides, you know, exemptions for things like road repair, but the exemptions do also have some conditions on them. You know, provided that, material is not, you know, stored and so on and so forth. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so I'm
Yep.
wondering about something like that, and I also think am I right that the standard setback in Wakefield is 25 feet, where, obviously not every property is that, but, where you would actually be able to see about 25 feet into the property, for most properties
Uh,
in Wakefield.
I'm not sure what you mean by the 25-foot. I'm not following that.
Well, isn't
You
there
mean
a
road right of
standard
way?
setback of houses, in Wakefield from the street?
Oh, I'm sorry. Paul was talking at the same time. I didn't catch the question.
Is there a standard or a typical setback of houses from the street in Wakefield?
Not necessarily. I mean, you know, it depends on we have like standard right-of-way widths usually, somewhere between 40, 50, or 60, depending on where you are in town. So we have an idea where our right-of-way is. But then that's where the setback comes from for the houses, to meet the zoning requirements. But, you know, we don't necessarily have a standard per se. It all depends on how the road was built. Sometimes they're off center, sometimes they're on the center. They're all kind of different, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if it would be possible to include certain just kind of standard provisions like the Wetlands Protection Act. I'm thinking about things that should, you know, be really obvious, like not dumping stuff into a wetland that you can see, you know?
For sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, keep in mind, we come to you folks for our RDAs all the time on projects that we're close. I mean, we want to make sure that you folks are comfortable with what we're doing. So we're not trying to circumvent that per se. I just need to I don't even know how I would, you know, which ones I would need to come to you for. That's kind of where I'm
Yeah.
at. So exemptions could cover that easily from my perspective, you
Think-
know, for
I
the
think
town
so, too.
operations.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they could be, because the exemptions under the Wetlands Protection Act for things like road repair, they don't require coming to the commission, I don't believe.
Yeah, well, depending on what we're doing, we will. I mean, if we're working in the shoulder, we'll still come, even though we don't widen a road by a lane, you know, we'll still let you know that we're widening or something like that. We've done that. It's like sidewalks, an example is a good example, right? We've done that recently with you folks.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Usually if
think
we're
that's all.
changing things, usually if we change something, we're gonna let you know if we're near something. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, but if you're just filling potholes, you're not coming to us.
I wouldn't expect to, no.
Okay.
No. I'm thinking more, it's like, that's more for my group, I would say, for the isolated wetland piece.
Mhm.
That would be me when if we're expanding something, in general. Sidewalk I use as the example because it's an easy one because we've done it recently with like Oak Street. That would be a good example. We came as an RDA, we got a negative determination, but we worked out kind of, erosion controls, all those types of things to make sure you folks are comfortable with it. So that would be a good example.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think about if the goal was just, don't fill an isolated wetland?
I think I'm comfortable with that.
That one you're comfortable with?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You're
Yeah, I mean,
laughing,
unless
but-
there's I mean, I can't, yeah, I don't know why we would necessarily do that per se. I mean, there's nothing that we don't go in backyards. I mean, the only thing we run into is, drain pipes and stuff, right? So we got to discharge drain pipes to like maybe a main wetland. There may
Mhm.
be a need to go through it with to replace the pipe or something. And, we probably want to vet that out how we would want to handle that. But I think we could do that through exemptions/regulations, right? I mean, and get to consensus on that, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, Jennifer and Paul, I think maybe we want to talk through what objectives we want to achieve with the isolated wetlands.
Mhm.
For me, definitely the stormwaters, like the water storage is so important.
Yeah.
I think we need to just like talk through these scenarios where Bill, you might be aware of a situation today where you're draining to an existing isolated wetland. I don't think we have an issue with that.
Well, what your definitions though, you're not exempting like detention basins or ponds or anything like that. So I would say for sure, if you're just going by vegetation and size, we would have most of those would all trigger based on the current
definition.
Yeah, and that doesn't really, I don't think that's your intent. I hope not. So,
No,
because you're
no.
definitely going to have the vegetation. I can tell you that. I mean, they happen in every detention basin. That's definitely going to be there. So,
Right. Yeah,
I'm-
we
Yeah,
saw
so-
it this weekend with that rain garden on Clyde Court.
Yeah.
Actually, the site visit there, and that's certainly becoming a wetland.
yeah,
in terms of
as you
vegetation.
know, because it gets the water multiple times a year. That's kind of what happens, right?
Right.
But I mean, you're allowed to remove the vegetation. You're allowed to do all those things through the Wetland Protection Act and maintain the basin. Right. So it
Right.
operates as intended. So, I think that's the kind of the nuances that we need to work out, to
Yeah.
make sure that folks that have, I mean, there's private drainage systems too that folks have to maintain. We don't maintain all of those. Like Clyde
Right.
Court's a good example. We negotiated it so that, we own the roadway itself and the maintenance of the roadway, but the neighborhood through an association owns the responsibility of maintaining that basin.
Mhm.
And we receive reports, on all these things to administer it. But, that's going to be somebody else that's maintaining that, and that would potentially affect those neighbors.
Speaking
So
from
like
three
how-
houses
what-
on that street do that maintenance.
Well, it's more like, so what happens if they want to add something off that, one of the lots that's close to it,
Mhm.
right? So if
Yeah.
they're within that 100 foot now, is that something that you want to have jurisdiction over? My guess is no, because it's not really near a real wetland. It's near a, this bioretention area. So,
in my mind, I guess I just was thinking, well, we wanted to regulate sort of naturally occurring isolated vegetated wetlands, not anything
Sure.
man-made.
yeah, which I think makes a ton of sense. Yep. Yeah, I mean, the performance standards were the big key there, and distinguishing between your vernal pool and your isolated wetland and how all that works. I mean, I think
Mhm.
that's what you'd be looking at. I mean, in general, right? I mean, if we're seeing a drainage report for a site that has some type of depression isolated wetland area, that may be non-jurisdictional, they still have to do an analysis of that to make sure that the stormwater doesn't increase. So we're
Mhm.
looking at those and we're getting that, review. A lot of this, some of this stuff also dovetails with the stormwater bylaw and making sure that we're all talking together. So we're not in little silos with these regulations. I don't think that helps the town much. And, I like seeing it where it's all, if, when I was, doing the private sector work, it was great when everything was in a location and I can go there, see it all, and it's not some hidden regulation I got to find, to meet. So, yeah, I think just clarifying all of these little pieces are fairly easy to do. So hopefully we can get agreement on those guys.
Okay.
So the bank discussion, so I think you covered that in the last one, right? So I think you're removing that definition from it, right? Is that what you folks were saying last week?
Is
Yes.
it, well, sorry, can I pause for a moment?
Sure.
Paul, is it okay if we leave it in and make it consistent with the Wetlands Protection Act, or do you think it really
I
can?
think if we're going to stay with the Wetlands Protection Act, I really strongly urge it that we just
Don't include it.
accept their definitions and don't try to redefine things.
Okay.
That
I would agree. I would
my
agree with that.
preference.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Okay, so we'll just delete it altogether.
That if we're staying with the WPA definition of bank and top of bank and all the rest,
Mm-hmm.
I think we should take definition of bank out completely. Yes.
Okay, Jennifer?
Yes, I'm in favor of taking this definition out and referring to the WPA definition.
Okay.
So the riverfront piece, I think you folks talked about that last week a little bit too, how it can kind of be read both ways. Clarifying that I think is important. Keep in mind bank and intermittent streams is still a resource area, right? So you have that should still be delineated, even though it's treated more as a wetland rather than a stream per se. But you still look at the bank as a resource area to protect. So I don't know if you want to even be defining the rivers and stuff per se, to that level.
Mhm.
You can just overarching saying, hey, we're protecting this with this bylaw based on the definitions in the WPA. And, I think that would cover you so that it's not confusing to folks.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to look at this one a little more carefully. I don't think we want to assert a 200-foot jurisdiction on an 200-foot wide intermittent stream buffer, do we?
I don't think that was our intent at all.
That's not our target. I mean,
Yeah, I wouldn't think. I wouldn't think.
I think we had perennial in several places and missed it in maybe one place.
Okay.
In the editing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
this is where it's just three of us looking at it. It's pretty tough.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Under the bylaw, so.
And our opinion on fall versus spring, so that's the same thing.
Well, do we look ready to you?
No.
No.
Not at all.
We don't feel
Not so
ready.
much. Not
That's
so
why
much.
I'm surprised
so much.
why so many people have turned out to.
Well, I think.
I did create urgency, and we started getting feedback, so that's good.
Right.
I think
Yeah,
that's
feedback's important.
I think
Yeah.
that's essential, actually.
Yeah.
If you don't get the feedback, we're going to just be out there presenting this in a vacuum.
Yeah.
No, we did create the urgency. We got people's attention. I think we need to maintain that.
Yeah.
I would suggest as we're moving forward, just a thought is, scenarios, right? So look at maybe grab 5 scenarios of different things that we're looking to regulate, or we are, explaining how something that's non-conforming would be regulated, those types of things, and having slides for those in future meetings so folks understand it. Because, from today's presentation, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to disagree, Jennifer, with your presentation. Everybody wants to, protect all of those things that were in the presentation. But you're going to run into questions where folks are like, well, how does this affect me? I don't know how that affects me. And having slides that are explaining it, I think, clarifies it for folks and make sure that they, they're comfortable with it. And I think that'd be an important piece as we're doing the future public meetings, to try to maybe have a couple of those slides to work it out. And obviously my staff can help with that if need be.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea, and I think it really just, well, it depends in part on having these things settled before the meeting, you know, in time to get those, and know that that is sort of the current draft, you know. But yeah, I think I'll definitely reach out if I feel like it, you know, would be helpful to clarify some of these things in order to present those scenarios.
Sure.
Yeah. So it sounds like for me, the big sort of pain point is the IVW, you know, just kind of wrangling that and maybe us solidifying what we're trying to achieve and then come back to you with this is what we want to do. How can we make our language not problematic?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great approach. Yeah, for sure. And, you know, keep in mind the isolated wetlands versus vernal pool, how you're distinguishing them. Obviously, they'll have separate performance standards, right? I'm assuming, you know, if you're going to allow it to be, you know, an isolated one to, if it's just for, you know, stormwater, you know, more of like a stormwater mitigation on site, you know, are you going to allow that to be kind of positioned as long as it meets the same areas? Are you, what level are you going to want to regulate it? Those types of things. Are you going to allow folks to touch it or you're not? I think just having all of those kind of answers would be important. And obviously, I think we understand the idea of the vernal pool and how that's all going to work.
Right.
But it'll be pretty important to understand first how you define it, and how and what folks have to do to delineate it for you, you know, and what is that going to look like?
I guess I'm thinking, just to answer your first question, vernal pool versus isolated vegetated wetland. I'm thinking the isolated vegetated wetland has water in it most of the time, right? Whereas
seasonal, right? It would only be just seasonal, right? Because it's a hole. Depending if you get the vegetation that grows in it, just because it's kind of a low spot, collects a lot of water. That's usually what they are. That's why the WPA kind of lets them, you know, you can fill them in at a certain size because they don't see the importance of it. But, you know, if you're looking to maintain those, I mean, I don't necessarily see a problem with that. But as a performance standard, if you were to say, okay, well, you can move this a little bit if you need to, it's really for stormwater protection. And we just want to make sure you're within the water table for certain times of the year or whatever it may be. And you can write a performance standard around that. So folks have some, you know, a little bit of more flexibility, or if you're considering that that's not what you want to see, then just write the performance standard around what they have to do. You know, maybe that doesn't have the 25-foot no touch, right? Is that the intent that has a 25-foot no touch? I mean, most folks don't do that. It's usually for the BBWs, but you know, like I said, I think in Concord, we didn't even, I don't even believe we had an isolated one, if memory serves. We just went vernal pool and highlighted that. I mean, because most folks are doing the no touch zones. That's what the bylaws are doing, codifying that, and then, you know, obviously adding the jurisdiction for the vernal pools. Which, I mean, obviously you have the critters in there, you want to protect them. So.
Right, I just wanted to mention that in the current bylaw draft, the vernal pool is defined by a presumption.
Yeah, presumption of significance, but how do we define that versus a isolated wetland? Like the distinction, right? There has to be, I'm assuming there's something in it. One of the, you know, is it a protected species? And you define all that by, you know, using the Division of Fishery and Wildlife stuff. You know, are they submitting to you some type of like what kind of document are they providing you so you know what a vernal pool is, you know, versus an isolated, just defining the differences. I think that's why we didn't have the isolated in the Concord one, because it was a little bit too confusing to mitigate it, and they didn't necessarily want to have it as a you know, with the same offset for isolated. But if you want that, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with it. So it's up to you folks on how you want to do it and making sure everybody understands it, that, you know, and how that would impact them.
So you're saying that it's not standard from what you've seen for vernal pools to have a 25-foot no disturb.
The vernal pools typically would have a 100-foot buffer, And you could
Mhm.
have the 25-foot no touch. The isolateds typically don't have the no touch.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And again, you defining how you're gonna what you're gonna define an isolated, so somebody can come to you and say this is isolated versus a vernal pool, and what you're gonna have to get for information so folks know that they have to, obtain that information before they file with you.
Right.
Just kind of working out what that process looks like.
Mhm.
These are some of the things once we got ours approved that we ran into down the road, and we just, we kind of ad hoc'd a lot of that. So I think with my current experience and, folks, what you're looking for, I'm sure we can find a balance on that one.
Okay. Maybe it helps if we identify one or two isolated wetlands that, we would have wanted to see protected.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good approach. Definitely. Yeah.
And okay. I think that's it on that. I know Elaine had given me feedback on the vernal pool stuff, and she
Okay.
had suggested, and Jennifer and Paul, this is new to you because I talked to her last night. I had emailed her a couple weeks ago. She had suggested just reverting to vernal pool habitat throughout and being consistent with the Wetlands Protection Act definition of vernal pool.
Okay.
And, and always say is regardless of whether the site has been certified by the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife.
Yep.
And then she suggested sort of pointing to their guidance for either, determining it's certified or not
Yep.
certified.
Yeah, that's a
Which
good
is
approach.
pretty robust. It's pretty robust.
I know, but I think folks need to understand that, right?
Yeah.
They have to do that. So, that is a cost to folks. They need to understand it.
Yeah.
And again, you're right. I mean, we're not these things aren't popping up every couple of feet. I mean, that's not in every other lot. That's not what's going to happen here. So, I mean,
Yeah.
they're going to be in specific locations. They're going to be in kind of lower areas as you're getting up the slope a little bit. So realistically, you're probably going to find them within a certain, offset from a BVW in general, right? And probably within 300 feet, you're going to see it, right? I mean, they're not, the salamanders aren't trekking miles, right? I mean, they're not
Right.
doing that. So, right? They don't, with their little legs, they're not doing it. So.
Do we have a way to create a Wakefield map that just identifies where we think we have these?
I don't even know how I would start that. I have to go in everybody's yards, right?
No,
I mean,
no, no.
try to
I
figure
think
it out.
we know
Right.
where.
Oh, if you know
for
where they
example,
are,
like the
then
vernal pool clusters are, or something. Is that helpful to? I don't know if there's a way for us to maintain a map, like how easy that is.
I would think, if you were to say, hey, here's examples of what this looks like, if you have it in your bag, like maybe it's guidance on your website,
Yeah.
kind of all of these lay together, right? So you're just
Yeah.
trying to make sure everyone understands it. So if you're saying here, if you see something that looks like this,
Mhm.
you want to take a quick pause to see if this is a vernal pool or not. That would be a, pretty standard fact sheet thing I'm sure you folks could develop and Ethan and I can work on.
Okay.
Suggestion for the vernal pools?
What's that?
Can you go over again Elaine's suggestion for vernal?
Yeah. Do you want me to, let me see, let me pull up.
Yeah, I think I understood what she was talking about.
Sure. I'm going to pull up the draft. So we'll move on. So now we're moving back to item 2, I guess, or
okay,
what we were talking about. Let me just share.
I have another question.
So, sorry. Are we seeing, what am I sharing? Give me one second. I gotta make sure I'm sharing the right document. It's too small. Okay.
You better enlarge it then for the rest of us.
No, I can't see, it doesn't come up on the way it reads. Let's see.
Okay.
Can you see?
I'm getting close and put on my glasses to read this one, Eleanor.
If you could hit the zoom button, that would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Bring
The
it,
Zoom.
make it a little bigger.
So, yeah,
right here, yeah.
the view, if you go to view
Yeah.
or hit the button, yeah.
Does that help?
That's more, the more you keep going, it's better.
Keep going a little bit more. Go up to 125 and see.
Okay.
There we- That looks good. That's pretty good.
Okay.
Okay. So we're gonna delete.
We're dropping the bank, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All together.
IBW is a wetland not protected under because of being disconnected. Okay, now that's
Yeah. So such a wetland shall be protected. We had this
naturally occurring. Okay.
Mhm.
and meets all the other criteria with the exception of connection to water bodies. So this naturally occurring is my suggestion.
To cover the
Um,
drainage pieces and stuff.
Yeah,
I
and
see
like
your point, yeah.
koi ponds or swim, things like that. Elaine suggests. Mhm.
I would say, I would suggest though that you have something in it, if it's even in the other definition of what, naturally occurring means, that would be a good definition to add. Because you're
Okay.
using that term, that's not a term in the Wetland Protection Act, right?
Right.
Because like I've run into scenarios where you have, and this has happened a couple of times, where there are lined, wetland areas. I can think of a couple that I've worked on that had lined wetlands that were there, not necessarily naturally occurring, but they, they're there, they have all the vegetation, they act the same.
Mhm.
So you may want like just examples that you might want to try to
I
clarify.
can't spell.
Like you see it like a golf course, like water hazard, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Like I ran into that up here in Middleton. I ran into that on a project in Concord that happened that was pretty similar, where it kind of cascaded into a few different wetland areas that were created, but they were all lined. So, how would you administer that? So,
They were
I think
lined. You're saying they were man-made ponds? Okay.
well, they were lined. They were lined. I don't know if, what it looked
Oh.
like prior to them lining it. I don't know if they wanted to hold the water or they were using it to irrigate and they wanted to hold a little bit more water, like just so you define it and folks
Okay.
would understand. I mean, that's a
Okay.
pretty specific example, but yeah, I think you can be general with how you're explaining it to make sure that it's
Okay.
clear.
I mean, the other thing too for us that would be helpful is if your stormwater standards are already addressing that maybe today, or how they're addressing it, so we don't.
Well, I'm planning to update. So we have to do some updates based on the EPA's permit requirements. So I have to have like new phosphorus and nitrogen controls that have to be added in. We don't have regulations. We were allowed to put them in through the Advisory Board of Public Works, but we didn't. We never did that. So my intent was to kind of revise the bylaw as a whole, or do this kind of the same thing I'm recommending to you folks, where bylaw regulation combo, get them both approved at town meeting.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking I may even be trying that in the spring if I can get my stuff together. So I'd like to make this update sooner rather than later.
Can you share that with us as you're going?
Once I get drafts going, yeah, for sure. I don't
Yeah.
have, I haven't even started it at this point. So
Okay.
Eleanor,
So, mhm.
I'm looking at your IBW and vernal pool, and you seem to have tried to eliminate the size completely as a consideration.
Oh, this is what Elaine was saying, that just that scenario of having to have a surveyor measure the volume or whatever,
oh, the
that-
square foot, yeah.
the square footage, that just eliminate that. But try to put some guardrails on what type of isolated wetland you want to protect.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like vegetation, like stuff, like you need something like that, I think, because I don't even know if the WPA really has all that stuff in it. I don't think it does. It's talking more about it being disconnected, and that at a certain volume it can be filled in. That's basically what it says, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's jurisdictional, what's not. It has to be at a certain
Essentially,
volume.
you're saying the same thing. If it was less, we were saying if it was less than 1,000 square feet in area, we were saying the same thing.
Right. So
But-
like I would say, what's the thought? Do you want to regulate it where it has an offset and folks can't touch things? Or do you want to have it set up so that, you have to just maintain the volume that's in it somehow with the same ability to have the vegetation. Like those are distinctions that would make differences on people's projects significantly. So it's really what you're trying to accomplish with that.
I think, well, for me, I would say we wouldn't want you to fill it in.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
picked up on that one.
we'd want you to maintain the same water level, I guess.
Yeah, yes, I
I
think
think
that
Bill was
those are good
suggesting,
standards.
you were suggesting, Bill, allowing people to fill in an area if they provide compensation someplace
Yeah.
else that
Exactly.
expands it in a different direction, so they could.
Yeah, and has the same type of hydrology, the whole deal. So whatever the level of the water level is that it's in there, you're providing the same amount. You have the hydric soils. You can do a replication area essentially, and
Yeah, but I have kind of an issue with filling in something that's supposed to be a natural, like, filtration thing. Like, you
Okay.
don't even know what fill you're bringing in to fill in.
Well, I think you can,
Yeah, you'll end
you
up
have the
with
ability to write it all up. That's what
Okay.
the performance standards are, right? And you say it has to be naturally occurring material, homogeneous with the stuff that's out there. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. Like I'm on every site anyway for drainage, if it's
Mhm.
large enough, right? And they're doing some type of pond or underground
Mhm.
infiltration system. So I'm digging holes with them all. So I mean, I know that information,
But
so I'm
are you, like, in your work, required to alter, like, a naturally occurring isolated wetland beyond just maybe, adding a drain to it?
I would have to give some thought.
Okay.
I was thinking if I'm running through so say there's an isolated wetland that's on top of a drain pipe, because I could see that scenario happening.
Mhm.
That would be the scenario that I would be thinking of for me. I don't know if it's a town property thing that would happen, but nothing jumps out at me right now. So
Okay. So we would need to have an exemption for maintaining existing drainage in that isolated wetland.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I think that's reasonable, or figure out something that might be a good approach.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, so vernal pool habitat. So what Elaine was suggesting was, she said the way we had it worded was confusing because we were applying a 25-foot. It sounded like we were only, like, it was inconsistent in both places.
Yep.
And then it sounded like we were giving it a 25-foot buffer, but 100 feet, it was just contradictory. So she said, simplify it, use vernal pool habitat, and it's any confined basin or depression, as well as the area within 100 feet of the edge of the depression, which holds water for a minimum of 2 continuous months during the spring and or summer, is free adult, the rest of that. Yeah.
And provides breeding and rearing habitat and
Right.
food, reptile, other vernal pool community species.
Yeah, so that's the definition, regardless of whether it has been certified. And then
So where are you putting the flag then in that definition?
the flag then, well, then you have to go down to so this is what I was trying to work through. We had this presumption of vernal pool habitat.
Yeah. That's standard language. That's pretty standard.
Yeah.
That's standard language. Yeah.
We started with that. She made a comment that it should be 100 feet within depression, that you don't want to use water levels, which I agree with, because unless you're there, like those 2 months that it's full, there's no water.
Yeah, I mean, so it's tough. So how is somebody going, if you're not using a water level or you're not defining, you're saying the depression. So what does that mean? Right. So it's so if I'm trying to flag it, let's look at it that way, right? How do I flag it? You're not telling me how to flag it.
We could put that in the performance standards, can't we?
I would probably have it in the bylaw, because the bylaw is telling you the jurisdiction, right? So that's where you would want this to be defined. So if it's like, you know, evidence of high water staining or, you know, whatever you want to
Mhm.
call it, you know, maybe vegetation
Okay.
change, all of those types of things are, because this is the definition of of what you're taking jurisdiction on, right? I think you got to
Yeah.
have a pretty clear definition on where you're
Yeah.
gonna start that jurisdiction.
Yeah. But they usually have a defined basin. Like I haven't.
I mean, in general, so if you look at the, you know, other examples that I've seen, I mean, there's usually 5 or 6, 8, 10 flags that go around a vernal pool that are based
Mhm.
on vegetation, high water line, that's usually how they're done. So
Mhm.
if you're not doing that, I guess the question is where are you having them put the flag?
Okay.
Top of slope. I mean, you know,
Top
that
of
could be
slope.
that. Yeah, top of slope. Well, that's like can be a whole lot, right? If it's all a bowl.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just all the nuances of how you're gonna do it.
Yeah, we can see. Again, I don't think we have that many vernal pools. Like we have them in certain areas.
Hey, you'd be surprised. I've run into them in my private sector days in the middle of subdivisions. So you never know.
Uh,
I
then
just wanted to
guidelines.
give a heads up that I'm gonna have to jump off
Jump.
in about 10 minutes or maybe or so. And I think once I leave, I think that means the
Oh,
forum is not
everything
Close the
going
goes.
so,
meeting, yes.
and, you know, but it sounds like there are still a number of things to talk about, which I think, you know, kind of suggest scheduling another meeting, with Bill, maybe offline.
Yeah, we should schedule a meeting with Bill offline. I think it's helpful to have Elaine or help her, you know,
Yeah,
just so they're clear on the intent. I think that's the struggle is, you know, refining that language that reflects the intent without clawing in things that we don't intend to regulate.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Um,
I think, and also making it abundantly clear to folks what is going to be considered each of these new jurisdictional areas. That's, you know, I think you have to have that because that's essentially what the bylaw is, right?
yeah.
You're saying these are the new resource areas that we want to make sure we're covering differently
Mm-hmm.
than the Wetland Protection Act. Here's how we're going to define them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then that tells you where to put the flag, right? So the same as like the bank definition that you had before, right? So you
Right.
gave definitions on where to put the edge of the bank, right? So you got to define where you want to put the edge of the vernal pool, where you want to put the edge of the isolated wetland, and then what your performance standards are for each. You know, vernal pools, I'm thinking you probably want to have some type of, you know, kind of water demand calculation or something as a performance standard to make sure that's a minimum, clean runoff, you know, those types of things. That's what you want to be trying to do.
Okay. I noticed I think Concord, they had a list of vernal pools that they maintain, like a inventory. Did you find that was helpful to kind of get people around the hang up that we were going to discover a vernal pool in their backyard?
Well, they had a much more robust mapping system, and you know, the Natural Resources Commission. I mean, the department had they had a director, assistant director, their own admin, and they had rangers for the parks. They had, I mean, so they had a huge resource of folks that were able to do all of these things. They also had, you know, we had a pretty substantial Blandings turtle habitat. That was a biggie. So we were basically watching those folks. So they had like little turtle trackers going to figure out where they're going and their breeding sites, like all that type of stuff. So it was pretty involved. But you know, I don't know if we're doing all of that stuff. So
I
you're
don't
not going
see
to go
us
radioactive
adding a
turtles. You
lot
don't
of
want to stick
staff.
you don't want to put the radio signal on them.
Have you seen any in this town though, Bill?
I have not, but I found them in my town.
The
Have you?
turtles? Yeah, the Blanding turtles. Yeah, yeah. It's
Oh,
kind of weird that they're
Blanding turtles.
Blanding's turtles. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. They're yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's kind of funny. There's other states that you can actually have them delivered, so they're not endangered in other states. So it's kind of a
Oh,
weird
really?
one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so Jennifer, I know you're going off, but basically I can send this out for her to look at. And then in terms of addressing Bill's comments, I think I was happy with sort of your responses that you had drafted. I don't know if you want to just put them in the below the question, the comment that Bill made, but the response, or do you want me to draft that now? Oh, we have to sign off in a minute.
I
Can
think we
you
just decide how you want, just have a follow-up meeting, right? Just do
Yeah.
that and we can work through all of these things. I think you just go by line. We can ratchet
Mhm.
this thing down pretty quick, I would hope. You know?
Yeah. Jennifer? Oh,
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, or just do, yep, we agree, we'll work with Bill on this. I agree, we'll work with Bill on this. Agree. And then
Yeah.
that's on the rec. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
If you want to schedule something with us and Elaine, I would suggest work to get that on the calendar.
Yeah, somebody want to take a lead, maybe do like a Google sheet or something so that we can kind of pull together
Find times.
times that everybody's available and figure out who can be where and who wants to be where, and
Mhm.
that might be
Okay.
the best way to do it.
Jennifer, are you available on Friday afternoons at all? Like at noon or not really?
It depends. It's probably the best day.
Mm-hmm. Like if we could grab them at 12 or 1, something like that.
That'd be ideal.
Yeah, 12 might work.
And maybe we just focus on the two key issues, which would be vernal pools and maybe start with vernal pools and exemptions, and if we get there, then tackle
Yeah.
isolated wetlands later.
So we could kind of create a schedule too. So if we
Mhm.
figure out a standing day,
Mm-hmm.
we can just kind of have a meeting to discuss each individual item so that it's easier and we're just moving forward in easy chunks.
Mm-hmm.
If we have to revisit it, the second meeting, we start up on, say, isolated wetlands, but we're following
Mm-hmm.
back up on vernal pool discussion point 3 or something. This way we can keep everything advancing as opposed to just, trying to bite off everything in one meeting.
Yeah, we don't want to keep.
Those aren't going to be
cycling.
productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Okay. So coordinate with Elaine and Ethan. Okay. Sorry, so just making sure what we decided to do with responding to Bill's memo is let me stop sharing. Or did I stop sharing?
No, you're
Oh,
still
you're still sharing.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. Yeah.
I guess I want to
Okay.
understand, Eleanor, are you suggesting we have all three of us and Bill and Elaine and Ethan sitting down in a discussion? Because if we are, we're going to have to publish that as a meeting.
Yeah, you published it as a meeting.
Okay. All right.
I mean, my thought, then we're not revisiting, right? Because you make a change when somebody's not there, and then you spend just as much time updating them on the change sometimes. So maybe it's good to just come in with a couple of examples and work through it, and then
Okay. That's
give
fine.
ourselves a time limit.
Why don't you circulate or ask you
Yeah.
to circulate some time for Friday
Okay.
if that's what we're talking about, is a Friday afternoon and trying to do a couple of those coming up.
Sure.
But I do think we're probably not going to hit the town meeting this fall.
Oh no, we're not.
Okay. That'll put a few people's minds at rest.
Mine
Well,
for sure.
I don't know. We never committed
I
to
thought
it,
I'd
so I
hear
don't.
that, Bill. Yes.
I wanted to work towards it, but we have to be make it a priority and put it on our
I
agendas.
absolutely agree with that, because otherwise it will continue to get dropped to the bottom of the agenda, and we will be back here 2 years from now trying to thrash through the same stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we're all trying
Out
yeah.
at this point.
Julie, I think, can we
She-
Yeah.
invite Julie to speak?
Sure.
I
Sure.
think this was really, really good tonight. Thank you for doing this. And you never did commit to the town meeting. I don't know where that all came from, but I'm so glad that people thought you did because you had a really good showing tonight. And
Yep.
you did a lot of great coordinating tonight. Can I give you some advice? You need to
Mhm.
get the public on your side. You need to get people at town meeting in the spring. It's never too early to start thinking about that. Bill Renault had mentioned keeping the guidance on your website. That's huge.
Mhm.
Meetings, this one and any that are just having to do with this bylaw issue and the work that you're doing separate so the public can see the progress. Because your website has definitely changed. I think I may have emailed you about that. It's harder to use. Some of the information is gone.
It is.
Yeah,
It
it's
is, we're peeling through that. Yeah, we did an update and a new server and a whole new
and
thing. Some of it,
And
some of it's more
much
accessible,
more-
but
it's
it's yeah.
much more troublesome than it used to be as a
but
result.
Yeah.
I don't know how the information got taken away. And I think that's part of what how the confusion was created about how you guys were supposedly definitely going to town meeting and you weren't. So if you could keep all of this information together, like pretend you have a desk, right? You have all the work in a folder and you have all the videos, all that information together. It needs to be accessible. And even the emails tonight, the work that the suggestions from Bill, to be able to see that was hugely helpful because otherwise
Mhm.
people are guessing. And that's why some people came to the meeting tonight saying, what the heck are you doing? Well, you were actually doing a lot, but we can't see it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we could add like I would say you have like a public comment section. Like
Eh,
you get the public folks, you have my stuff in there, so everyone knows what everyone's been talking about.
Because when I
You
was
can see the
trying to,
history.
I couldn't comment because I couldn't find anything. But it's not just your website, it's a bunch of the websites. And
Mhm.
again, there are 24 municipalities in Middlsex County. There are only 4 who don't have these, and we're one of them. So this is a huge step. You aren't rushing. I was actually laughing, hearing people thinking we were rushing. We're not, but you're doing it in a very thoughtful and deliberate way now. And the end justifies the means. I don't care how you got here tonight, but this is really good. Thank you for doing this. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah, Bill mentioned us keeping the drafts going on the website, so they're dated.
I think,
Nobody.
yeah, I think they need to
Nobody.
be dated so we can track where we are.
Right,
Do
and no
like a
one.
track changes you kind of do like a track changes version. We did that with MBTA in one of the iterations of that. So
Yeah.
you could see what got changed. I think
And
that's
you-
important.
And maybe it's helpful to see the draft we initially started with in the way back.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Maybe somebody on here has an idea of, because we did this when I worked in the Tri-Town district up near where Bill lives. We did
Yes.
together and they looked at each other's bylaws and they looked at comparable communities. And that's something that you could share with the community because once they see how 220 communities in Massachusetts have these, and we're actually an outlier that we don't, especially within our own community, to see something comparable gets people on board as well.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, we could even have something where we're talking about, if we're peeling it from a spot, you kind of highlight that it came from this town. I
Yeah.
mean, we were using some of the Concord stuff. I mean, I wrote it
Yeah.
originally with the other person, so we can explain that. But some of them are very, they don't have any real protections. They're not changing anything. There's a couple of towns that aren't doing anything with it. They just have a bylaw that like regurgitates the Wetland Protection Act, which isn't, I think, what we're looking to do here. So
No, I mean, I don't think it's
No.
worth bother if we're going to do that. That's all.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, I think we need to make it clear what's extra and also what would be like an extra filing or I think, working through that.
Define how you want to do it. Like if you're already filing and it meets, all the Wetland Protection Act related things, do you need a filing if it meets the 25 foot and everything's fine and it meets the requirements? Are you going to ask for a separate filing or not?
No.
I would say you probably don't need to, right? So it
No.
should be just for these items that you would have to file the local for,
Right.
or have a joint approach for the applications, like all those types of things. But that's like the last thing we do. kind of figure out
Mhm.
how that works.
Okay,
All right.
thank
Well,
you.
I'm gonna go see my wife
All right,
tonight.
thanks so much for your
considering this
time,
is
Bill.
a
It's
second
really
in a row.
appreciated.
So, all right,
Yep.
we'll talk to you
Thank
folks.
you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sorry.
Jennifer,
Um,
you need to jump? Okay. Then
Are you
well, I suggest we have a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to it. Well, wait, so do you guys want me to just address the questions as we discussed? Agreed with Bill, follow up, and then just we can send it out so
Yeah.
people know.
Get it to us, and then we can work through it. And
Sure.
let's get something scheduled for a Friday discussion.
Wait, sorry,
This or
Jennifer.
or the subsequent Friday, but let's get it on the calendar so we can start moving those.
We can't hear you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Can't hear you yet.
No, nothing.
Wait, you're muted now.
Okay,
No,
what
you-
about now?
No,
There
you're
you,
all right.
yeah.
Yep, there's,
Was he doesn't need a letter summarizing things, and I agree with that at this stage.
Oh, don't say anything. Okay.
He said it's not necessary, we're just gonna meet and keep working, and I agree.
Okay. Well, I'll just update it for our records so we know, and just, following up, because obviously people, a lot of people probably heard these concerns, and I think there's another town board discussing the bylaw that's not going to town meeting, that's going to town meeting, that,
you mean
So-
the bylaw review committee bylaw?
no, it's the advisory board of public works.
Oh, okay. Right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Second,
second,
in favor?
yes,
Eleanor,
yes.
I'm in favor. We are adjourned. We are meeting again a week from tonight.
Yes, and we're gonna put the bylaw and organizing stuff at the top of the agenda.
Well, the 30th is a special meeting once again, just like this one, so it should be.
No, but we need time to organize during our regular meetings and just make sure we're efficient
Okay.
and
Well,
make sure.
our first regular meeting shows up 2 weeks out.
Mhm,
Our
okay.
next regular meeting.
Oh, that's true. It comes up there. Okay, thank you.
All right. Good night. all.
Bye. Good night.